Now, as we do continue to observe the South African National Defence Force Armed Forces Day in Thohoyandou, Scopa chairperson Songezo Zibi says the SANDF needs adequate funding. However, he warned that the current funding model and the way resources are managed are the reason the force is on life support now. So while the budget has fluctuated recently, in the past 15 years, the SANDF has lost an estimated 50 billion rand in funding, largely due to budget reallocations to fund other state priorities. And in 2025, Zibi urged Parliament to reject the defence budget if it did not include a clear turnaround strategy. He joins us now to tell us more about his thoughts on this issue. Good morning, Songezo, and thank you so much for your time. Welcome to Newzroom Afrika. As we marked Armed Forces Day, what is the true state of the SANDF today in terms of operational readiness?
Good morning, Ms. Chaba. Look, the SANDF is able to do, I think, the minimum that it's supposed to do domestically. The thing that has drained its manpower, financial and other resources has been the deployments outside South Africa in the context of its chronic underfunding in the budget. And I'm hoping that the decision to pull the troops back from the DRC will have an impact on the SANDF's state of readiness. I must also make a quick comment about the deployment to various areas in the Eastern Cape and so on. These also need adequate funding because it costs approximately 3,000 rand per soldier per day to deploy them on the ground. So these deployments are expensive. They can't be a permanent solution unless the Treasury and Parliament are going to appropriate sufficient money for the SANDF to do the job.
Sure.
And what I find is that the SANDF keeps getting us to do things that it doesn't have resources for.
Now, speaking of Treasury, there is a narrative that Treasury starved the military, right? But Cabinet approves the budget collectively. Is it politically convenient to blame Treasury?
It's irresponsible, actually, and it's a political statement that a senior officer of the National Defence Force should not have made because they're supposed to know better. There is a budget subcommittee that prepares the budget. There is a forum that's called FORSAT, which is all the directors general. They take an entire year fighting over what the allocations are going to be. The Treasury is not a dictator that allocates resources like Father Christmas. And I think it's a sign of the ill discipline, in my view, that we've continued to see from senior ranks of the SANDF. Yes, we agree there's chronic underfunding, but to attack a government department in that way, in a misinformed and inaccurate way, is actually totally irresponsible.
Now, as Scopa chair, you see the books. What does financial mismanagement in the SANDF actually look like on paper? What exactly is going wrong? Is it procurement or asset registers, payroll?
I mean, it's the procurement. First of all, there is a funding issue. It's really important on the financial stage because what happens when the Defence Force gets deployed somewhere at short notice and there's not enough money, they then have to take money allocated for other things and use it for that deployment. That becomes unauthorized expenditure. So that's why you see across government all of these big sums in unauthorized expenditure. It simply means it was not in the budget, it was not approved by Parliament for that purpose. It's now been diverted for another purpose. That is the first problem. The second problem that you have in the Defence Force is procurement. There is very limited strategic procurement. They will buy equipment, medical and other equipment that is not needed or that becomes obsolete as soon as it arrives. They will spend money on fruitless initiatives such as doing things with or in Cuba and so on. And that has an impact on the Defence Force. Then you've got delays in critical procurement material that the armed forces actually need. Armored vehicles that have been delayed for years, uniform that was delayed for years and so on. So the overall state of the allocation and management of financial resources is actually shocking. And the funding has to come with conditions for improved governance. Otherwise, it's going to be similarly wasted.
And you've gone as far as to say you want more funding but cannot in good conscience ask taxpayers to fund a system riddled with corruption. that's principled, but soldiers are suffering now while we wait for reform. What needs to be done?
No, look, the defense minister was at the committee last year, and we decided to give her some time to implement changes at the Defense Department, in the Secretariat, and all the way into the Defense Force. We will be inviting her to come during the second quarter of this year to give us an update as a committee to see. Because the departmental budget votes will happen around that time, and that will inform the position that we're able to recommend in relation to allocation of resources.
All right. Now, the Defense Review calls for a younger, agile force, yet we have permanent employment structures that keep soldiers into their 50s. Now, is it politically difficult to transition older liberation-era soldiers out of frontline roles?
Of course, I mean, these things are always complicated, but there should be an exit plan for people that cannot serve on the front lines anymore because they are simply too old. It's also unsafe for them to be on the front line, facing, needing to run, for kilometers on end, carrying heavy loads, and they're in their 50s. In other countries, the system that is in place is that when you sign up for the armed forces in the enlisted ranks, you serve or sign a contract for 5 years. When that contract ends, you are typically around 22, 23, and you get a scholarship to go to college in the United States, for instance, and you then study for free. For the senior officers who become generals, they usually pick people up from university graduates with their master's degrees and so on, and they enter the army at the rank of captain, and they go up and become generals. Those are far fewer, and those belong to your permanent force. But the majority of your personnel are people that you keep rotating every 5 to 7 years, because at around age 27, 28, they've got to leave the defense force, but they've got a way out. Treasury, I know, was prepared to fund such an initiative, but the defense minister at the time wasn't happy about having to let go of so many people.
Yeah, let's talk about defense ministers, Chairperson Zibi. Briefly, do you believe the people appointed to lead this particular portfolio have had the political will, the technical understanding, and the courage to take on the generals and force real change?
So look, General Olumisa, who's the deputy minister, and firstly, Minister Njimotsekga is a very experienced hand in government. I'm not certain I would have put her in the defense portfolio, but that's the president's prerogative. But then the pairing with the deputy defense minister in General Bantu Olumisa, who's actually been part of previous reviews, is very experienced. My experience of their interactions with us in Parliament in the presence of the officers is that they generally not afraid of them. So I don't see why they shouldn't be able to implement the changes unless there are other political problems elsewhere.
Now, you sit in one of the most powerful oversight positions in Parliament. What concrete structural solutions are you personally pushing for? And have you put anything formal on the table?
No, we've taken an approach as a committee right throughout the government estate, which is to say we develop an understanding, a detailed understanding in the first year, which we have. We reach an agreement with the minister in terms of what areas need to be paid attention to. We will make more interventionary actions once we receive the report from the Auditor General. First, receive a report from the SIU. We compare this year with last year, and then we begin to implement a program of parliamentary interventions together with the Defense Portfolio Committee that should then lead to changes. If things are going well, and I don't want to prejudge the situation, then it's a different process that we undergo with the same ministry.
All right. Now, before we let you go, Chairperson, remember this past Tuesday, there was a huge turnout of young hopefuls hoping to get recruited into the SANDF. So what is your message to young South Africans watching this who are considering putting on that uniform and serving this country?
No, it's always an honor to serve your country in any capacity, in the defense forces, especially because you're risking your life, but also in other areas such as sports and so on. What I really would say is that they must build options. They must use the defense force as a stepping stone, because you get a lot of skills in the defense force, get a lot of life experience, you get to learn about leadership and so on. But always see your options to go within and beyond the defense force so that you can serve in other areas of South African life. And once we inculcate that attitude, we also won't have this a case of people being stuck in the defense because they don't have other options.
Thanks very much, Chairperson. That was Scopa Chairperson Songezo Zibi.